I'm Diego Sanchez, COO of HW Media, and this is 10-Minute Talks. My guest today is Dustin Owen, VP of Eastern Division Sales at Waterstone Mortgage. Dustin, welcome to 10-Minute Talks.
Diego, thanks for having me. I'm honored to be at your pleasure, at your benefit.
It's so great to have you on. Before we jump in, could you give a 30-second introduction of yourself and Waterstone Mortgage?
Yeah, so I am a 20-year or going on 20-year mortgage industry veteran. I got my start in my early 20s as a young, broke rookie loan originator. Like, I understand what it means to be in credit card debt with student loans deferred, trying to pay my bills while trying to build out a book of business. Luckily, I figured that out. I became a top producer, opened up a branch. Then that branch came to multiple branches. Then with multiple branches comes executive leadership. And about 3 years ago, I launched a podcast because I heard all the cool kids were doing it. Couldn't come up with a good name, so we named it the Loan Officer Podcast. Although I asked people never to let the name fool them because we don't just create content specifically for loan officers. And other than that, I do some real estate investing, do some angel investing, and help run a mortgage company.
Why did you decide to start the podcast?
Great question. How much time do we have? I mean, if you go back to when I was
10
in
minutes.
fourth grade, I was writing poems on how I could become a sports announcer. By the time I was 18, I fell in love with talk radio. But really, it came down to a point to where I was coaching loan officers. I was speaking at large national conferences, and I was still originating loans. And throughout my daily activities, I'd have borrowers say to me, "Gosh, I wish you had that recorded so I can tell my spouse about it tonight." Or I'd have loan officers come in my office and ask me a question, and then mid-sentence they would stop me and ask if they could pull out their phone and record me. So I came to a point like, wait a minute, if people are asking me to be recorded, let's start doing videos. Well, tried videos, it was disastrous. So then I was like, well, what if we did it like a radio show, but we called it a podcast, and then we recorded it so we could have the audio plus the visual. So I literally sat down and I said, I'm going to create content for the next 2 years, 100 episodes a year. And I'm making it at a minimum for the 48 loan officers that directly report to me, the 200 LOs that indirectly report to me, and their 2,000 clients a year. And let's see where things go. And here we are 3.5 years later with millions of downloads, and it's no longer just our LOs and their clients, but it's everyone in between.
I think I have a sense of the answer here, but would love to hear it from you. How does your podcast support your career and your efforts as a production leader and executive at Waterstone Mortgage?
Oh gosh, that's a loaded question, right? Because the podcast is a separate entity. Right. It is something that I do with my business partner and my co-host. And yes, it supports the mortgage company that we represent, but it also supports hundreds of other mortgage companies and thousands of other loan originators, plus all of their clients. In today's day and age, I would say it personally benefits me because you become an influencer whether you want to or not. Right. You have a message, people want to tune into that message. Therefore, you have a certain level of influence over their career, over their decision making. So we live in an age where influence is what the millennial generation is chasing after. So I think just my personal brand benefits. And then yes, whatever brand I represent, currently I represent the Waterstone Mortgage brand, and I have for the past 15 years. I think that brand benefits as long as the content that I'm creating is positive content, because that brand could suffer if the content I was creating wasn't perceived as being positive content.
That makes sense. And I imagine that in this purchase market, building that brand and being an influencer can help with real estate partnerships potentially.
Yeah, I think anyone who has their own show, their own podcast, whether it has 100 monthly subscribers or it has 25,000 subscribers, I think the benefit of a podcast is it allows you to backdoor your ideal client, whether that's a referral source, whether that's a big account that you're trying to land, and it gives you a reason to make a phone call, it gives you a reason to schedule a meeting, gives you a reason to get to know someone. And then you're ultimately bringing value to them because you're creating an asset that you can share with them that allows them to go out and further promote their brand in a more passive way than an aggressive way. So in that manner, yes, doing a podcast gives me access, whether it's to the top producers in the mortgage space, whether it's to some of the best real estate agents, or even the best entrepreneurs. The podcast definitely helps open up doors.
And you run a group of branches at Waterstone that has generated over 1 billion in originations annually, I believe. Why have you decided to build your business at Waterstone as opposed to striking out on your own or at a different company?
That's a great question. At the end of the day, it comes down to two things that I look for: autonomy and a voice. Like, I'm going to work at a company where I have autonomy to make the decisions that I feel like need to be made on the day to day. And that gives me a voice as it pertains to the direction of the company. And I think autonomy and voice is something that is earned, or it can become a louder voice, or it can have a greater bandwidth of autonomy through experience and through proof of concept. But at the end of the day, I look for an employer that offers that, and I get that. And as long as I continue to get that, I don't see a reason to fix something that isn't necessarily broken. The question of going out on your own is a very interesting question because it's definitely something I've thought about multiple times throughout my career. And it just comes down to risk versus reward, right? Because you go out on your own and there's a multitude of risks. There's a massive step back financially, right? Your income's going to take a pretty substantial hit for the first 1 or 2 years. And then you have to think about, well, what's your end goal? Am I building something to sell? If I'm building something to sell, well, I work in the mortgage industry. You don't get a crazy tech multiple in the mortgage industry. And what's my quality of life going to be if I were to go out on my own? And how disruptive is that going to be to my wife and my children? And what type of flexibility am I going to be maybe giving up by going out on my own? So is it a question that I've thought about? Yes. Is it a question that I still think about? Yes. But every time I've weighed the pros and cons, my term, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. I'm fine having a fourth partner. My fourth partner is the mortgage company that I partner with. My other partners are David Holbrook and Mike Smalley, right? So David, Mike, and I for the past 15 years have been co-leading and co-growing our region together. I think that also comes into play for my personal story is, well, I'm not just making a decision for Dustin Owen. I'm making a decision for Dustin Owen, how it impacts wife, children, how it impacts 8 branch managers, 48 loan officers, and 50 other support staff. But I'm only one of 3 decision makers. I have 2 other decision makers that also have wives, who also have kids, who also have career goals that have to be thought about when making a decision.
So what is your advice right now to your team at Waterstone and your podcast audience on muscling through this current difficult housing market?
Yeah, so head down, blinders on, and mush. I mean, as sales professionals in the mortgage industry, as well as real estate, because I know your audience is real estate as well, I think too many times we don't think of ourselves or hold ourselves to the same standards that we hold our children's teacher, our children's school bus drivers, the local cop, or the local firefighter, meaning we don't get up every day, put on our uniform, and go to work. And I think if we just were to get up every single day, put on our uniform, and go to work, and when we're at work, we actually focus on doing things that move the needle or help us get 1% better, I think the rest of it would take care of itself. It's just really easy when you're talking about very entrepreneurial, 100% commission sales professionals that they think that they can hold themselves to a standard that they wouldn't hold their child's school bus driver or even their child's teacher to, which is those individuals have to get up every day at a certain time, put on their uniform, and get to work. That's the messaging that I have, not just for our LOs, but to the 20 or 30,000 LOs who tune into us every single month. It's just that. Blinders on, head down, mush. Make sure you're getting up every day, putting on your uniform, and going to work. And when you're at work, you might as well put in work.
I love that advice, Dustin. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Diego, thank you so much for having me.